Okay, good evening, everybody. I see we have a group of people that have already joined us, so let's get started. Welcome to the first information session on the upcoming municipal election. My name is Nadia Power. I'm the Manager for Public Engagement with the municipality, and it's my pleasure to host this virtual information session this evening. Now, before we get going, I just want to recognize that no matter where you might be joining us from, the land on which we live, learn, work and play is Treaty 8 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree and Dene, and the unceded territory of the Métis. And that's where this meeting is being hosted from this evening. Tonight, we're hosting the first of two information sessions for candidates in preparation for the municipal election, which will take place later this year on October 18th. This evening, we're going to be exploring the topic of nominations, and we hope you'll join us at this same time, same format next week, when we delve into the topic of campaigning and the campaigning process. As we're meeting in a virtual setting tonight, I just want to ask for your patience. We have practiced and we think we're ready for this session this evening, but of course we might have some technical issues. If we do, just bear with us, we'll work through those quickly. Before we dive in, I just want to share how this event is going to unfold this evening and to introduce our presenter. Joining us this evening is Darlene Soucy. She is the returning officer with the Department of Legislative Services here at the municipality. And in just a moment, I'm going to turn things over to Darlene to introduce herself and to walk us through the nomination process. She's going to be able to provide a concise yet a comprehensive overview of information that candidates and potential candidates might want to know about the nomination process. Immediately following Darlene's presentation, we're going to open the floor to your questions. We're aiming to keep the session to about a half an hour or so, but we'll see where your questions take us and we'll stay on longer if you have more questions for us. Throughout the event, the chat feature is available for you to ask questions and provide feedback. You can also text us your questions. I'm going to ask Arndis, our producer here this evening, to post in the text box, in the chat box there, that phone number. If you want to make note of it, the number that you can text us at is 780-788-3925. We also have Greg from the Communications and Engagement Department also helping us this evening. Thank you, Greg and Arndis. To protect all participants' privacy, your microphones and cameras have been disabled. And you'll notice that the chat viewing capability has also been disabled. This is just to protect your privacy. But rest assured, municipal staff, Greg and Arndis, myself and Darlene are going to be monitoring all of the questions and comments that come in that are submitted through the chat, and they're going to be passed along to me and we'll get your question asked and answered. In case you missed something that's said here this evening, we're going to be posting this session at rmwb.ca/elections. That'll be up shortly, as early as tomorrow. While you're there, at that site, I would also encourage you to visit the frequently asked questions section. That will also be updated after tonight to reflect any new questions that we get from those of you that are joining us this evening. And then one final point. I'd also like to recommend everyone that this event, remind everyone that the event is open to the public. As such, participation in this event should not be construed as a reflection of anyone's political aspirations. So now, without any other delay, I want to introduce Darlene Soucy. Actually invite her to introduce herself now in just a second and take us through the nomination process. Darlene, over to you.
Go ahead, Darlene.
Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, Arndis. As Nadia said, my name is Darlene Soucy, and I'm the returning officer with the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. And tonight we're going to go through our candidate information session, and as Nadia pointed out, our topic tonight is nominations. So I'd like to take you through our session, our PowerPoint now. As the returning officer, I'm responsible for conducting the 2021 municipal and school board elections, which, as Nadia pointed out, take place in October this year. If you're looking at running for council or school board, the first thing you need to determine if you qualify as a candidate. And here's the main qualifications. In addition to the qualifications, candidates must not be otherwise ineligible or disqualified under the Local Authorities Election Act, the Municipal Government Act, or any other legislation. It's important to note that it is candidates' responsibility to read and understand all the legislation governing elections and to ensure that the candidate's campaign complies with all legislation. It is the candidate's responsibility to seek appropriate legal or accounting advice from professionals or to contact municipal affairs regarding the requirements under the Local Authorities Election Act. In addition to being qualified, you must determine if you're eligible or ineligible. And there are multiple reasons that you may be ineligible to run in the municipal election in the fall. And some of the reasons are on the screen. If you'll note in the last bullet, it says if you have a prior conviction within 10 years of an offense under any election legislation. Election legislation includes the Local Authorities Election Act, the Election Act, the Election Finances and Contributions Act, and the Canada Elections Act. And if you're looking for more specifically of the reasons that you would be ineligible, please refer to the Local Authorities Election Act. And that's the next thing you must look at when you're deciding whether or not you're going to run for council is the time commitment. Being on council requires a minimum commitment of 20 to 25 hours per week. Council meetings are currently held weekly on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month, beginning at 4 p.m. This excludes statutory holidays or any scheduled recess periods. Council attendance is often required by 3 p.m. or even earlier. Budget meetings average 3 to 4 working days and typically take place in November. The exception to this is following the election. Then budget days typically take place in the new year, which gives the new elected officials an opportunity to get their feet wet. Council orientation will follow the election, and it typically takes place over several days and provides an overview of multiple topics such as council's role, responsibilities, duties, key municipal plans, bylaws and policies, as well as budgeting, financial administration, and strategic planning. You may be appointed to an external board or committee for which you would be required to attend their meetings. These may include Communities in Bloom, Regional Recreation Corporation, Wood Buffalo Housing and Development Corporation, just to name a few. Our candidate information guide provides more information on the external boards and committees that council may be appointed to. Council workshops are often held for initiatives such as strategic or business planning and team building. These often occur during the day or may occur on weekends. Council members may also attend conferences held by organizations of which the municipality is a member. For example, Rural Municipalities of Alberta, they host their conference in the spring and the fall. Alberta Urban Municipalities Association will host their conference in November, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities will have one in June of 2022. Currently, these conferences are being held virtually, but as public health orders change, that may change as well. In addition to what we've pointed out, councillors may also be invited to multiple community events throughout their term, which are not mandatory to attend, but will add to the time commitment depending on the number of invitations and types of events that are accepted by the individual councillors. It is important to be aware that candidates who are elected will have a very busy schedule for about 6 to 12 weeks of mandatory meetings and other commitments immediately following the election. For more information regarding the schedule, please contact our Legislative Services Department. You may reach out to them by calling 783-743-7000, our Pulse line, or you can email legislative.assistance@rmwb.ca. A detailed schedule is typically available following nomination day. As a note, for rural councillors, transportation, including flights and hotels, are paid for by the municipality, including a meal per diem for attendance at council or community meetings. All bookings are handled by the individual councillor. Now that we've reviewed the qualifications and time commitments, the next step is your nomination. As a reminder, you must be eligible. Eligible to vote must be, excuse me, a person who's eligible to vote must be at least 18 years of age, a Canadian citizen, and have resided in Alberta for at least 6 months prior to nomination day. Excuse me, this is for the eligibility for candidates. And then it's imperative that all nominators are also eligible voters who reside in the ward for which the candidate is being nominated on the date the nomination papers are signed. We encourage you to have more nominators to ensure you have more than enough eligible nominators on your form. So you must have at least 5, and we encourage you to get more than that. It is the candidate's responsibility to ensure that all forms are completed properly and signed by a commissioner for oaths, a notary public, or the returning officer. Please note that the nomination period does run for a lengthy amount of time, and on nomination day, you may find that the returning officer or commissioner of oaths may not be available to you. If you wish to have your nomination papers checked or commissioned prior to nomination day, please reach out to our office for an appointment. Nomination deposits are refunded if the candidate withdraws, is elected, or receives at least 50% of the votes of the last person elected to that office. There are reasons that a returning officer cannot accept your nomination. If the nomination is not completed properly in the prescribed form, not signed by at least 5 eligible electors, not accompanied by the correct deposit, is not sworn or affirmed by the person nominated, the nomination will be invalid and cannot be accepted by the returning officer. As noted, the returning officer does not have the authority to challenge the validity of the information provided by the candidate on their nomination forms. This must be done by an eligible elector. When it comes time now to filing your nomination paper, they can only be accepted during regular business hours from Monday, January 4th until 12 noon on Monday, September 20th. So it is quite a lengthy period that candidates can file their nomination. Note that the nomination dates and times are legislated, and the 12 noon deadline on September 20th cannot be extended. Completed nomination forms can be sent by mail or courier. Please call or email to be provided the information on submitting your forms by mail or courier. Please ensure they are complete, properly signed and commissioned with the correct deposit fee. If you're going to mail or courier your forms, your deposit must be paid by check or money order. Please do not send cash or credit card or debit card information in the mail. Nomination papers and deposits may be filed in person with the elections office by making an appointment. If you choose to file your papers in person, you must comply with all public health orders, mandatory restrictions, and complete the COVID-19 pre-screening questionnaire. You must also comply with the Regional Municipality Wood Buffalo bylaws that are enacted at the time. If you visit our website at rmwb.ca/elections, you will find a nomination checklist and guides for completing the appropriate forms. Nomination forms are available in the candidate nomination package and the candidate information package, which are online, and all required forms are also available from Municipal Affairs in fillable format. And if you'll see on the screen, we have both of those locations for you. Candidates may withdraw their nomination up to 12 noon on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, which is 24 hours after the close of nominations. As noted, the returning officer cannot accept your withdrawal if it would result in less than the number of candidates required for that office. For example, in Ward 1, there are 6 positions available for council. Therefore, withdrawals will be accepted until there are 6 or more candidates still running for municipal office. Withdrawals will not be accepted if there are only 6 candidates. And just to review voter eligibility, the upcoming election. For the October 2021 election, an individual is eligible to vote if they meet all the criteria listed. And remember that only eligible voters may sign your nomination papers. When residents come to vote or eligible voters come to vote, they are required to make a statement that they're eligible to vote, which includes providing their current address. And every elector must produce an authorized identification in order to vote. And a full listing of authorized identification will be available to voters prior to the advance votes and election day. Here are some examples of authorized identification, and they vary from identification that has your photo on it with your current address. You can use your income tax or property tax assessment, your vehicle ownership, utility bills, etc. In addition, something that's new for 2021 is that an eligible voter who has shown ballot ID, who makes and signs the appropriate declarations, may also vouch for another voter who does not have acceptable identification. And additional information on vouching requirements will also be available to voters prior to the advance votes and on election day. Information on the October 18, 2021 election for municipal council and the local school boards is available from multiple sources. Candidates are advised to check the various websites regularly for updated information. And now we'll take your questions. As noted, you can type your questions in the chat box during this live presentation or text 780-838-3925. After the live presentation, please email elections@rmwb.ca or please call our pulse line at 780-743-7000. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Certainly covered a lot of ground in that presentation. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to check in with our producer here just to make sure that I am on the screen now. I'm not seeing the prompt. Arndis?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you. So, as Darlene said, we're going to get right into the questions and answers here now. We've already reminded you that you can also text in any questions you have to 780-788-3925. I am going to check and see if we have any questions coming in. Ah, yes, good, we do. The first question, Darlene, can a person run for mayor and councillor?
Thanks, Nadia. No, a person may only run for one office for each elected authority. So you can't run for mayor and council. You can only pick one of those. However, an individual may run or be elected to a position on council and on a local school board. So you do have an opportunity to be on two elected authorities at the same time.
Great, great, thank you. Next question. Just a second, sorry, I'm just getting into the chat here now, guys, bear with me. The next question is, does a person need to live in the ward that they hope to represent on council?
Hi, Nadia, that's a good question. Yes, a person must be a resident of the ward for at least 6 consecutive months before nomination day. So they must be a resident of the ward in which they would hope to run since at least March 20th, 2021.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Darlene. The next question that we have here. For someone who has decided that they want to become a candidate, how do they get started? What do they need to do first? So Darlene, I know you've given the whole presentation here about all of the things people need to keep in mind, but what's the first thing people need to do to get started?
I think the first thing that a person needs to do is that if someone wants to become a candidate, they must first determine if they're eligible. So the basic criteria to be qualified is at least 18 years of age, a Canadian citizen, a resident of Alberta, and has resided in the municipality and in the ward for which they want to run for at least 6 months prior to September 20th. So we're looking at least March 20th. And they also need to ensure that they're not ineligible for any of the other reasons that we know it, which are also in our candidate information package online. And they direct you to where to find that information in the legislation, the Local Authorities Election Act. I think the next step then will be to review the candidate information that we've provided regarding being on council and the time commitment to ensure that it's a right fit for you. As I've gone through it, the time commitment is considered part-time, but it does add up pretty quickly. The basic we're saying is 20 to 25 hours per week, and that's without, joining all the extra committees or doing the social events and things like that. Once they decide running for them, the nomination process, forms, and guides are all on our website at rmwb.ca/elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. We're getting lots of questions coming in. The next one is, so we talked about nomination forms, and this question is, who can be a nominator? And in particular, can family members be nominators? Darlene?
So Nadia, a nominator, whether it's a family member or not, must be an eligible voter. So they must be at least 18 years of age, a Canadian citizen who resides in Alberta and in the ward in the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo that the prospective candidate wishes to represent. So as long as the nominator is an eligible voter, it doesn't matter if they're a family member or not, they can go ahead and sign those forms.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Darlene. I see that Greg, one of our moderators here this evening, has let us know that we had a text question asking for the municipal affairs link. For those of you who might not be following along in the chat, I'm just going to let you know that you can find that link on rmwb.ca/elections, and that's under the information for candidates. The next question that we have here, so the question is, are the candidates for council or mayor allowed to receive monies from sponsor from the public? If so, can those funds received be publicly released? So again, the question is, are the candidates for mayor or council allowed to receive monies from sponsors from the public? And if so, can those funds received be publicly released? I'm not sure if they mean released or reported, but Darlene, can you answer that?
Yes, Nadia, I can. Candidates for council or mayor, once they've been nominated, are able to accept contributions, either in kind or monetary, from people who are resident in Alberta only. So they cannot accept contributions from residents outside of Alberta, nor are they permitted to accept contributions from corporations, employee organizations, and unions, that type of thing. So those are prohibited. After the election in March 1st, 2022, candidates have until March 1st, 2022 to file their candidate disclosure statements. And in that statement, they will disclose the contributions that they have received, monetary and in kind, and they will also have to file a detailed expense report. And those documents are public. And once they're filed, the public can request to view them during regular business hours. So again, the deadline for them to file their disclosure is March 1st of 2022. So that gives them, a few months after the election to clean up all of their finances.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Darlene. And just a reminder too, guys, that any questions we're getting this evening that are not already on our frequently asked questions section on the website, rmwb.ca/elections, we will be adding to that FAQ. So we have some great questions coming in. Thank you for that. The next one, another good question. We're being asked, is there an ideal professional profile preferred to be a councillor candidate and to serve efficiently to the public? Darlene.
Nadia, our council candidates come from all walks of life. you know, and they all have something to give back to their community. So, you know, as long as they meet the eligibility criteria and not otherwise ineligible, everyone is welcome to put forward their candidacy for council and for school board, as long as they meet the criteria.
Thank you. Thanks, Darlene. And I think that's a perfect segue now into the next question. We're being asked if you could please again confirm the weekly time commitments. So you went through those. If you could just reconfirm those, Darlene, please.
Okay. So for a council member, you know, for every council member, we say that the minimum time requirement is 20 to 25 hours per week. So you're looking at, you know, quite a lot of hours, especially, you know, you have everyone has other commitments. And as I noted, if you, depending on how many committees, how many external committees you join, you know, how many conferences you attend, how many social events that you attend, those will accumulate. And as well as you are on more committees and, you know, different agencies, you also have more time committed to those for reading materials and things like that. So we do stress that we are a minimum of 20 to 25 hours. And for the mayor is considered more of a full-time position and often keeps regular business hours in addition to any events outside of regular business hours that attend. And council meetings, of course, run in the evenings.
Yes, thanks, Darlene. I know we have an earlier start to our council meetings now than we used to have, but we still, you know, it's still an evening meeting. So I have another question here to get to. The question is, what happens to the deposit if a candidate later decides not to run? Do they get the full deposit back, Darlene?
Yes, if the candidate decides not to run, as I noted, they have until 12 noon on September 21st, 2021 to withdraw, and they will get their full deposit back. So if they're running for council, it's $100. If they're running for mayor, it'll be $250, and they will get it back. You know, through a process. So, you know, obviously we'll have to have our finance people write a check and things like that. So, but they are eligible to get it back. And as I noted, if they get elected, they also get their nomination fee back. Or even if they're not elected, but do get at least 50% of the last person elected, number of votes for the last person elected, will get their nomination fee back. So we do find that probably about 75% of the people do get their money back.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I learned so much through the course of this presentation myself, and even as we were preparing, I didn't realize that there were so many reasons and conditions under which you would get the nomination deposit back. So that's really good to know. Thank you for that, Darlene. We have another question here now, and the question is, are physical signatures required for the nomination form, or are there special provisions due to COVID-19? Darlene, I'm just going to remind you, it might take a second before we actually flip over to hear the first part of your answer. Go ahead.
So the question is, are physical signatures required? Yes, they are. So that is one thing that the legislation has not changed on. Physical signatures are required on your nomination form. We will not accept electronic or photocopied signatures, and that's not permitted under the legislation. So when collecting signatures, prospective candidates need to follow all public health orders that are in effect. So there are ways to do it, and there is guides that the province have put out. You know, something like if you know you're going to the person's door, you may want to leave it there on a clipboard, step away, have them fill it out. Then when they move away from it, go and pick it up. But there are many ways to safely collect your signatures.
Yes, thank you for that, Darlene. We're all finding ways to adapt and trying to find creative ways to get the business done that we need to do. So hopefully it's going to be less difficult in the coming days and weeks ahead. Greg has let me know that he's received a text question, and the question is about whether councillors receive compensation. Darlene, can you comment on that, please?
That's a great question, Nadia, and councillors do receive compensation. So as noted, councillors, I don't have it right in front of me, the amount, but if you go to our candidate information package on our website, it does give what councillors and the mayor make throughout the year. They also have several allowances that they do get. So in addition to their compensation, you know, what we typically call a salary, but they call a remuneration. They also have a technology allowance. They do have an allowance for transportation. And as I noted, rural councillors who must travel, that travel is also paid for by the municipality. So it's not something that comes out of the rural councillor's pocket as such. But if they visit our website and look at the candidate information package, it will detail all the compensation that council does get.
Thank you. And again, that information can be found at rmwb.ca/elections in the FAQ section. Sorry, information for candidates section, but we'll probably add that into the FAQs as well. Moving on, we have a lot of questions coming in, which is great. Thank you so much. The next question is, who decides if a nomination is accepted and why could someone's nomination not be accepted? Darlene?
So myself as the returning officer reviews your nomination papers for completeness, and then will accept them by signing your forms. There's actually a spot on the form where the returning officer does accept your nomination. The returning officer cannot accept a nomination that is not completed in the prescribed form, has not been signed by at least 5 eligible electors, it has not been sworn or affirmed by the person nominated, or it has not been accompanied by the required deposit. It's important to note that the returning officer doesn't have the authority to challenge the validity of the information provided on your nomination paper and candidate's acceptance form or your candidate information form. That is the responsibility of the electors of the municipality and may be challenged through the court system.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Darlene. You were expecting that, I could tell. You had that answer all ready to go, so thank you for that. Now, the next question sounds like it's a follow-up from something that was discussed a little earlier this evening. And the question is, when a councillor candidate accepts funds from a sponsor, wouldn't it be like a conflict of interest, Darlene?
When a councillor candidate files their disclosure papers, one of the things that they do have to file, anybody who has given a donation, if they've given a donation that's a minimum of, excuse me, that's over $50.01, their name becomes public. The candidate also must provide to, on their documents, the full address and everything of those contributors. Which doesn't become public because, of course, that's private information. If an eligible elector feels that there's something wrong or that there is an issue with one of those, with any of the deposits or, excuse me, contributions that a candidate has received or any of their expenses, then that is something that they would bring to the attention of the Election Commissioner's Office with Elections Alberta. So we don't rule on them. Our duties afterwards, when they file their disclosure showing their contributions, is to make that public and just to review it for completeness.
Good, that's great to know. So really, it's not like a discretionary decision at all. It's just that if all of the requirements of the nomination are included, then the nomination would be accepted, is what I'm hearing. We have another text question come in. Great to know that there's some people joining us that way, and they're taking advantage of the option to text in their questions. Some people find that easier, so we're glad that you're taking advantage of that. The question is, are councillors able to remain on boards and committees? Over to you, Darlene.
So I'm thinking this question may be related if a candidate is sitting on a board or committee at the time. It will depend on the board or committee. So council members, certain boards and committees, council members are appointed through their own process during the organizational meeting, which is held each year, and they determine which boards and committees they would like to sit on. Some of the boards and committees, it's in the bylaws or in their articles of association that council members are appointed to those committees and are voting members or non-voting members. Other committees, council members may only sit on them as liaisons, as non-voting liaisons. And that information is actually all held all within our candidate information guide. If you'll go through, we list all the committees and whether council members can sit and whether they can sit as voting members, non-voting members, or just liaisons. So I encourage you to look at our package on our website.
That's great. Thank you, Darlene. And as we want to keep reminding people, a lot of this information, it can be found at rmwb.ca/elections, information for candidates. Also, you can go to our FAQ section. We're going to have time for just a couple of more questions, I believe, here. Let me just see if we have any other questions coming in. Darlene, I believe we may have gotten to the end of the questions. I'm just going to check in with our moderator. I'm going to give Greg and also Ernest just a chance to let me know if there's any other questions here. It looks like we've gotten to all of your questions. If for any reason a question has come in that we haven't gotten to or we missed, or indeed after this session, if you want to send in any further questions, we'd be happy to address those. The answers, the questions and answers will be updated in the FAQ section of rmwb.ca/elections. So just want to remind everybody that we will be doing this again next week, same time, same place, and next week we're going to be talking about campaigning. I just want to, before we wrap up, I just want to hand it back to our returning officer, subject matter expert this evening. Darlene, did you have any other comments that you wanted to make before we wrap up here?
I wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight and for your wonderful questions. And as we've noted, we're always available to take your questions. So email us at elections@rmwb or reach out to our Pulse line, and you can do it either way. You can also reach out to our Pulse, submit a question, submit a request, or call them at 780-743-7000. And I certainly look forward to speaking with everybody again next week and taking your questions. Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Ernest.
Thank you. Thanks, Darlene. So that concludes our first ever virtual information session for candidates for the upcoming October 2021 election. We keep saying it, but certainly do go visit rmwb.ca/elections to learn more about the election. You can go back and review what we've talked about here tonight. See Darlene cover the presentation again in detail, so you'll be able to go and view the video there in the next day or two. That should be available. That's also where you're going to find the link to participate in the next session in this series, which is going to be all about campaigning. And again, we'll take your questions at that time as well. Just before I wrap up for the evening, I want to thank again Darlene, our returning officer, for taking us through the nomination process. I want to thank also Greg and Ernest for producing this evening, but mostly I want to thank all of you that have expressed interest in either becoming a candidate or potentially becoming a candidate in the upcoming election. Good luck to everybody, and good night, everyone.